new to these sessions. I'm Kiki Rees-Stavros. I work for Mentor Morn, and we deliver the Welsh Government Smart Towns Wales programme. So Smart Towns helps businesses, councils and communities use data and technology to help regenerate the high street. And I think this session will be a really key part of that. So with no more ado, I'll pass on to Anna. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. So as I mentioned, nighttime economy is my favourite topic to talk about. I've been involved in researching nighttime economy originally in the UK and so the last 10 years in Australia. But yeah, for many years, more than 10 years, I've been working in this field. So I'm a founder and director of a company called Ingenium Research, which specialises in nighttime economy measurement and data and research. I've literally just finished my PhD researching kind of nighttime economy policy making and governance here in Australia, and so kind of understanding where this whole kind of nighttime economy thing has come from and why we're investing so much money in it, and how we used to do things in the past before we did this. I'm a research fellow in urban studies working on a project called The Night Shift at the University of Melbourne, researching night workers in Australian cities and understanding their contribution to our overall economy. And I also teach a massive planning students a module called Studio N, which is about how to manage cities at night. So as you can tell, I'm really kind of immersed in this. So before we begin, we probably want to know, what is the nighttime economy? So I think this is a really important question to address at the beginning of any session about the nighttime economy, because there are so many different definitions. So in terms of the definitions of the time of what is the nighttime economy, what time does it happen? There's the 24-hour economy, there's after hours, there's after dark. But the main definition, or most common definition that's used both in the UK and Australia, is 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And that's quite often really it's a nice easy way of splitting the night and the day up into two kind of equal chunks. And then when we look at the nighttime economy, we often split it into phases of the night. So we have that kind of twilight time, which is kind of a really kind of good opportunistic time to get those people who are leaving the work or after work drinks, trying to get them to hang around a little bit longer in towns and cities. Then you've got the early evening and then the late night and early hours. And we've got very different strategies and approaches that we take to managing those different periods of the night. In terms of the activities of what the nighttime economy entails, so generally there's been this focus on what we call the core nighttime economy, which is food, drink and entertainment. And I think that's really because I suppose it originated in the UK, this definition that we came up with kind of 15 years ago, really because that was something that we saw as a way of attracting people into town centres. I suppose kind of back in the 90s when we were trying to revitalise town centres, and we had all this kind of out of town shopping happening at the time. Food, drink and entertainment was a way of attracting people back in. And similarly, post-pandemic, it's been used particularly in Australia, which we're kind of very heavily urban. We've got a lot of people living in cities in Australia, not so many people living out kind of rural regional areas. So it's kind of cities and towns are where people generally live. And so we use the nighttime economy as a way to bring people back in, away from their Zoom screens, and kind of to get back into the city and actually kind of using the city again. We also measure the non-core, which is like transport, accommodation, policing, etc., and the supply chain as well. And in recent years, there's been this kind of push for greater diversity of activities and people using the night. So traditionally, governments used to kind of think about the nighttime economy as something that needed to be regulated, something that we needed to control, because it created a lot of antisocial behaviour. There's a really big association of kind of alcohol and alcohol-fueled violence and the nighttime economy. And then over here in Australia, in about 2011, a fantastic lady called Susie Matthews did what we call the Churchill Fellowship, travelled around the world, looked at how other places did things, and came back and was inspired and said, actually, rather than just regulating, a better way of actually controlling some of that kind of antisocial behaviour is actually try to just diversify away from just kind of alcohol-led 18 to 30-year-olds out on the streets. Actually, let's try and think, okay, rather than just having drink-led activities and that age group, let's think about having other activities happening at night and trying to get kind of more families using the nighttime, trying to get kind of older people using the nighttime a little bit more and feeling more confident about going out, and having that range of different types of people, not just by age, but also all sorts of different diversity out on the streets can actually make it feel safer at night. So the nighttime economy has become this really big thing kind of globally. On the map there that you can see on the screen up on the right hand corner, these are the places in the world where they have established nighttime economy governance. So things like nighttime committees of businesses and governments kind of coming together to kind of discuss issues and kind of work together to try and support and grow nighttime economies. And there's also, in some places, they've kind of appointed these leaders to manage the nighttime economy. So they quite often, the name that they quite often give for this is a night mayor, which I kind of quite like the idea of being a night mayor of somewhere at some point. Nightmare of Wales, that would be fantastic. But night mayor, and then they have like they had a night czar of London who's currently kind of stepped down, so they're looking at what they're doing there next. But they've got night mayors, night czars, nighttime economy managers, etc. Sometimes within government and sometimes kind of external to government. So sometimes it's kind of more of a lobby group organisation trying to support, and sometimes it's actually government who have appointed somebody to kind of try and support that kind of relationship and the liaison between the community, business, and government, and trying to kind of manage those relationships and any issues. And there's just some examples down there of some places around the world that have implemented nighttime economy strategies, but there's so many that I could, these ones I've been kind of showing for a while, but there's so many. I think there's more than 80. I think I saw Mirik Milan, who was the night mayor of Amsterdam, said there were more than 100 worldwide now. So it's really kind of taken off. And then here in Australia, we've got all across Australia, we've got mostly local government. So in Australia, we have local government, state government, and federal government as three different tiers of government. And it's really been driven originally by local governments. So lots of different local governments have established nighttime economy action plans and strategies and done some research to understand what's happening in their night times as a way of attracting people to their areas. I think, because if we're thinking about the core nighttime economy, that can be activity that happens during the day as well. So I think that I'm just thinking about in Wales, because I actually grew up in a hotel in Camais Bay in Anglesey. And so actually a lot of, we weren't just open at night, but I think some of these core nighttime activities, so the food, drink and entertainment, can actually be a really big attractor and kind of for visitors, and also for kind of making a place kind of really feel more livable. So I think it's a really important thing to consider. Here in Australia, if you were wanting to look at somewhere in Australia that is really excelling, and to be honest, even if you wanted to look at kind of where in the world is excelling at this, I would look at the New South Wales government's 24-hour economy office. So New South Wales is the area, so Sydney sits within New South Wales. It's the kind of the state where Sydney is based. And back in 2020, they published this kind of Sydney as a 24-hour economy strategy. And then the two guys you can see in the top right-hand corner, so the guy at the far right-hand corner, his name's Mike Rodriguez, and he's the 24-hour economy commissioner. And the guy to the left of him is we have a nighttime economy minister. So we actually have kind of, and it's legislated that the commissioner's team, or the commissioner and his team are kind of in place and will stay in place. And they have a team of 60 people now working full time on the nighttime economy in New South Wales. And this year we have a budget of $54 million just for the state of New South Wales. So that's roughly 27 million pounds ish. I'm not sure exactly the exact rate, exchange rate, but it's about 27 million pounds that is being spent on this, on supporting the 24-hour economy in New South Wales. And they have lots of different programs. the reports at the top are the reports that I've done in the past to kind of measure the success of their strategy. But then along the bottom, you can see that they've got things like the Uptown program and Purple Flag, etc. And this is all about, I think really the main thing is about bringing businesses together to look at what data that they've got, to share information, and to collaborate to kind of think about how they can improve their nighttime economy. So it could be about putting on particular events, or it could be looking and thinking, why have we got rising antisocial behaviour, and what can we do to it to support, like, or to alleviate that collectively, and kind of coming up with solutions to problems. I think that's kind of a really key thing. There's a lot of money being spent, but I think it's driven by businesses. So if we can bring businesses together to kind of talk about these issues, then that's probably one of the most important things that can be done. But as I mentioned, there's also a lot of funding. So we have kind of lots of different kind of live music venue programs and that type of thing. So funding to go to try and attract different types of activities, live music, etc., and beyond that kind of alcohol-led nightlife. Talk a little bit about the work that I do in terms of, so my thing's kind of been measurement. So back in, I think it's 2009, we did the first ever measurement of the UK's nighttime economy. And we estimated that the UK's nighttime economy at that particular time was worth £66 billion. And we thought, okay, and we had a league table of all the various towns and cities across the UK. And Sydney caught on to this and said they wanted us to do a cost benefit analysis. And then they, all the Council of Capital City Lord Mayors, so the 8 capital cities across Australia, said that they wanted us to measure it as well. So we started doing this measurement for all the Lord Mayors. That's me and my husband, because we used to work together at the consultancy in the UK. And then when we moved over to Australia, the UK business closed, and so we were asked to actually set up a company to kind of continue this research, because they wanted to continue this annual measurement. So basically, we just did this job as, you know, a one-off piece of research once a year. We had a day job, and it measures the number of businesses, the number of people employed within those businesses, and the amount of sales turnover generated by those businesses for the nighttime economy. We use kind of Australian Bureau of Statistics data, which is similar to the ONS data in the UK. And we do the measurement for Australia, its states and territories, and then 88 local government areas within Australia. And this year we had 15 different cities involved in the report, which is the one on the bottom right of the screen. I can kind of share this. I can share these slides afterwards and send that out, and I can share a link to that as well, just so that you can see the type of things that's possible. In the latest research, so the latest data that we have available is financial year 2022 to 2023. I've done a little bit of a comparison here for from 2018-19, so kind of we always still go back to pre-COVID, because the times between pre-COVID and now has just been so turbulent. It's always easy to kind of see how things have gone in that way. And perhaps surprisingly, but because of all that investment as in nighttime economy as a way of drawing people back to cities, across Australia, from pre-pandemic to current times, we've seen an 18% increase in the number of food, drink and entertainment businesses, which is a huge jump, which is fantastic. Particularly leisure and entertainment. But I think leisure and entertainment, I should probably mention, also includes gyms, so kind of 24-hour kind of wellness and gym type of stuff has really taken off over here post-pandemic. Employment hasn't grown so much, so employment has not really returned to exactly what it was pre-pandemic, and that's really, there's lots of different reasons for that, but I know that we've had huge staff shortages, which have kind of created issues, but also we found lots of cost savings in terms of using technology, you know, the ordering on the table with the QR codes and that type of thing, which is, I imagine, I haven't got the exact reasons as to why this is happening, but making some kind of, these are just kind of suggestions, I suppose, as to why that might have, why employment might not have recovered. And sales turnover has jumped up, but then again, so has inflation. So there's some of that is inflation, because that is not adjusted for inflation. And then back in 2019, because that's that data that we've just seen here, and this is the kind of data we do a lot more detailed kind of standard industrial classification analysis and that type of thing. But this data is the one that we've done for many, many years. And then back in 2019, we did this huge review of like 150 different data sources across the world and within Australia to understand how we can better measure and understand the nighttime economy. One of the things we came up with was using the data that sits behind Google Maps. So we now use the data that sits behind Google Maps to look at how many businesses are open. So if you kind of search for, there's an example on the left there of Dame. So you just search for restaurants near me or cafes near me, and it's got those opening hours that you can see on the bottom. So we kind of pull the data. We were Google for Startups company, so we worked with Google to work out how to pull that data, and then to be able to work out within each city how many businesses are open by day of the week and by time of day. So that chart that you can see with the spike on the Thursday, that's looking at all businesses are open at some point between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. So you can look and say, okay, we know that Thursday nights, quite often Thursday night is like late night trading with shopping, retail. And so you can see Thursday nights, we've got this huge big spike in number of businesses open. But then when we might look at foot traffic or spend, so consumer card spend, we might actually see a huge big spike on a Friday and not so much money spent on a Thursday. You might see a big spike on, say, a Tuesday. If you've got kind of a bit of a disjoint between what's open and when people are spending their money or kind of walking around the streets, then you kind of want to address that. And it's really helpful for businesses to be aware of that as well. Can also show what the opportunity is in terms of what could be open at night. So for example, I'm not sure exactly what the chart at the bottom with the percentages in. So we worked out day of the week, what proportion of, I'm going to say this is retail because I can't remember which one this is, but what proportion of retail, all the retail in that area is open from 6 till 9, 9 to 12, etc. This is actually probably food rather than retail, because I don't think there's that much open late night and early hours, but yes, you can actually look at what proportion is open by time of day and day of the week, which actually shows you what the opportunity is of all the stuff that is closed that could be open. Obviously, whether that should be open is very much dependent on like market demand, but it does show you what the possibilities are. We also use that same data to kind of provide, we've done this in lots of different ways, but provide maps to show where activity is happening. So this is showing the number of businesses. So each of these kind of little squares shows how many businesses there are open from 6 to 9 p.m. on the left and 9 to 12, 9 p.m. till midnight on the right. And this is in Adelaide. This is really helpful to understand, I suppose, even from like a policing perspective as well, but also just generally to understand kind of what's happening in your city and where we should really be focusing on for the nighttime economy or town. So you can see kind of the strip along that middle strip that's very busy. There's a street called Hindley Street in Adelaide. And then on the right hand side, you can see this one little blob along that strip that still stays kind of dark. That is actually the nightclub precinct. So that's there's more than 10 venues open in that little area. So then you know that is the area that we should kind of be focusing on in terms of that late night economy. But then as it goes through to 12 till 3, you can still see you've got kind of that same little blob you can see is where the nightclubs are open. They're still open midnight till 3. And then after 3 a.m, everything really kind of quietens down. And this is really useful as well for if you've got a lot of workers in your area. So it doesn't, when we think about the nighttime economy, it's not always kind of the consumers. There's also a lot of people who work at night who might work in, say, I'm going to say like mining or electrical services, logistics, etc., that might actually need access to kind of, they'd might like to have, or hospitals, etc. They might want to have like a coffee at 3 a.m, or might want to go and grab some food. And so it's really helpful actually to be able to understand what is open and where it's open in terms of the services that are open to people at night. talking about people who work at night. So it's actually really hard to, particularly in Australia, there's not really any decent surveys except for this Time Use survey that understands what time of day people are actually working. So we do a lot of economic analysis and a lot of economic surveys, labour force surveys, but they don't ask people what time do they work at night. This survey, Time Use surveys, which also I think the UK has a Time Use survey as well, asks people for every 5 minutes of the day what they are doing and where they are and if they're working and all that type of thing. And so I use this at a national level to understand which sectors people are more likely to be working in. So you can see kind of that dark blue on the left is a combination of food and arts and recreation, which is the sector that we all kind of consider as nighttime economy. But you can see it's kind of only a relatively small percentage of people when compared to kind of the rest of all those other people who are working at night. And this was done during COVID, so there's a lot of kind of caveats around it because a lot of people, there's a high proportion, for example, of education and training people working early hours, but it might be teachers catching up, I'm not sure. But yeah, the second biggest group is that kind of healthcare and social assistance. And we also know that logistics and so people kind of delivering things at night are also make up a big group. So it's really important, I think, when we think about the nighttime economy, not just to think about the patrons and the people who are kind of going out, but also thinking about the workers and whether they're workers in hospitality or other people who are out and about using your streets at night, then that's also important. So as I mentioned, I do lots of nighttime economy research. I've got some kind of examples of more detailed kind of granular analysis that we've done for different towns and cities across Australia. So we kind of use the data that I've just shown you, because that's kind of a lot of the data that I do myself, but then we also use other sources, which quite often kind of councils have got access to in-house or can perhaps get access to. Sometimes there's big businesses that have access to this data as well. So we found some of the big developers or really big kind of hospitality groups quite often buy this data and can share that as well with council, sometimes when council can't afford to access it. So things like consumer card spends in MasterCard and Visa, that type of thing. The foot traffic, and sometimes whether that's sensors or GPS, like I think there's BT data that you're using over in Wales. And there's some fantastic data that Stonington, that you can see on that bottom right hand corner, Stonington's using, which is kind of, they've got sensors on everything. So you can see how many people every minute are walking past, how fast they are going, how many bins there are when those bins are 3/4 full, that type of thing. So you can get some really fantastic sensor data, crime data, and quite often that's alcohol related, non-family violence assaults is what we kind of focus on when we think about the nighttime, because that's what people are really fearful about. But also it's important to also look at perceptions of safety, because quite often how much crime is happening versus how unsafe or safe people say they feel are sometimes very different things. So I think they're things to really kind of consider when looking at this. Public transport, health services, we've used ambulance call out, so we actually got kind of longitude, latitude of exactly where the call outs were and why they were being called out. I don't know if that would be available, but we found that to be quite useful. Environmental health data, so noise complaints, for example, it can be quite important, because I think over here I'll talk about that in a moment, but it's been an issue that we've been seeing as a real challenge. And then you can see there's a whole host of other things you can consider. Some of these things actually involve going out and collecting primary research, doing primary research to collect this information. I'm going to move on to talk. So that's kind of all the data that kind of I use, and I could seriously talk to you about this for hours. So I'll try and hopefully that was interesting, but I'll kind of talk a little bit about kind of some of the nighttime economy initiatives that are happening over here and some of the things you might consider. So you'll see this, I've kind of copied this table out of our latest nighttime economy report, but our nighttime economy report, as I mentioned, we had 15 cities participate this year. And each of those cities kind of contributed, I think it was about 400 to 500 words to say kind of what they were doing to support their nightlife and nighttime economies. And that's probably, if you're, I'm not sure exactly who we've got on the call today, but if you're thinking of ideas as to how you can support your local nighttime economy, then there are lots of different ideas in that report which explain what all the different councils across Australia are doing. But this was really a summary of all those 15 lots. So quite often it's kind of reducing regulatory financial burdens. It could be putting on events and festivals. I think lighting is a really important thing. I'm not sure if that's even in this list, but I know that and it could actually be more of a state level, so kind of it would be like a kind of Welsh government overall kind of level thing. But lighting is can be really, really important in terms of designing an area and really changing the atmosphere. So kind of it's important, I think, with lighting to make sure that we have kind of good. You want it to be safe, and it can kind of really. Sometimes brighter does not necessarily mean that it feels safer. So sometimes you can feel like the spotlight effect. So kind of if you're in the spotlight, you might look out into the darkness and not feel particularly safe. But then lighting can also really change the atmosphere and make somewhere feel really really nice. But also we have lots of environmental considerations, and particularly over here, I'm not so sure in the what the state is in the UK now, but over here, because the indigenous people used the night sky and the stars were very important. The light pollution that we're getting over here, we really kind of take into consideration lighting and making sure that we're putting lighting in a good way. But yeah, anyway, you can see some examples there. You can kind of delve into that a bit further. I won't talk any more about that particular slide. Special entertainment precincts, I think, is a really interesting one just to share with you, because I've talked to people. I had a guy visit from Urbact, who looks after kind of 10 European cities and nighttime economies. It's a really fantastic program that he's running. But it didn't seem that there was anything kind of similar to the special entertainment precincts over in Europe as to what there are here. So special entertainment precinct is basically a way of managing kind of noise complaints and sound within nightlife areas. One of the main ways that this has kind of been dealt with traditionally is through a process, I suppose, or something called the agent of change approach, which basically means if a developer comes in, it's the developer's responsibility, the person who's making the change, to kind of make sure that it fits in with the local area. So if you've got an apartment block and you want to put you as a developer want to come in and put a nightclub next door, then you need to make sure your nightclub is very soundproofed. Or if you are a developer wanting to put an apartment block next door to a nightclub, then you need to make sure that that your apartments are soundproofed. Now that can be challenging because overall, because quite often for nightlife venues, it can be really expensive to do all that soundproofing, and so over time, basically you get like this erosion of nightlife activity, or the potential for that. And so in Fortitude Valley back in 2006, they established the first special entertainment precinct. This guy called Frank Henry did it, and he was a planner, or is a planner still, in City of Brisbane Council. And he thought about the way the planning is done. So if you've got an industrial area, you have kind of an industrial zoning, and you say, well, it's an industrial zone. If somebody wants to put in a residential block next to it, then it's a residential zone. Oh, sorry, industrial zone. You can't do that, or that if you do that, you then can't complain about the noise from the industry because you've decided to build a house there. And so he kind of took a similar approach, basically put in a layer onto the planning scheme that said this is a nightlife area and we're going to protect it. That approach has now been adopted by multiple cities across Australia and states. So in Queensland, which is where Brisbane's based, they now have like multiple special entertainment precincts that they're establishing. Canberra, which is the Australian Capital Territory, in the eastern states as well. That bottom right hand corner, you can see that is sorry, I should also say the left hand side is the left-hand image is the Brisbane Fortitude Valley overlay. And then the bottom right-hand corner are the two different precincts that they've established in Canberra. But New South Wales, the place where Sydney is based, have actually got a whole programme now where they're developing these special entertainment precincts, and they're giving funding to councils to apply to establish them in lots of different places. So rather than just having like one single special entertainment precinct, establishing them all over. And that's going well. Western Australia's also got them. So this is a really interesting and big development. I actually think it's quite helpful to have that certainty for businesses about that they're not going to be shut down through residential complaints, which is something that was happening a lot over here, but also certainty or kind of knowledge, I suppose, for the people who are living in those areas, that they are choosing to live in that area. It's also quite good to establish these things before you have a huge amount of residential development, because I imagine it's probably quite tricky to implement after you've got that, but they are still doing that in New South Wales. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Thought we did quite a bit of work for Canterbury Bankstown. You can see the image on the bottom right. So Canterbury Bankstown is a place in New South Wales just outside of Sydney, kind of western suburbs. And we did kind of some work for them to identify where their nighttime economy activity was happening. And you can see those kind of dark patches and the different colours are all kind of showing where stuff's happening at night. And Canterbury Bankstown's a really interesting example, actually. This is something, just if you want to look for examples of diverse nightlife, which is not just kind of alcohol-led. It's been given a purple flag. So we've kind of brought, the purple flag is a scheme over in the UK that the Association of Town Centre Managers developed. And which shows, accredits areas based on whether if they're safe and vibrant. It's a slightly different program over here, so they've kind of developed kind of rules around how you apply and who accredits it through the government. But yeah, it's got this kind of purple flag in Canterbury Bankstown. But it's a really the whole of Canterbury Bankstown, but particularly this in Lakamba, which is the town within it. It's got a very, very high Muslim population, big Muslim population. And so really there's a lot of activity that happens around the mosque, so kind of religious activity. But we also had, I think, Ramadan, I think it attracts, I want to say like 1.5 million people or something like that over a 10-day period, just for all the different kind of food trucks that go along and all the celebrations that happen around that Ramadan period. But there's also a whole heap of stuff that's open at night, so it's quite an interesting case study if you ever want to look for something that's kind of slightly different, I suppose. I think it's also important to consider changing consumer habits. I'm kind of jumping around a little bit here, but I think kind of, although we've got kind of lower people in Canterbury Bankstown don't drink as much alcohol because is that high kind of Muslim population, but we also have a lot of young people who are not drinking as much. Young people, well, I can talk to Australia. Haven't looked at the UK statistics recently, actually, but people in Australia, young people, are drinking less. So fewer young people are binge drinking. But when they do binge drink, they are drinking more, or they are drinking more. So generally they're drinking less overall, but they are still the population that are most likely to binge drink. That's what I'm trying to say. But you can see kind of that middle image is the Gasso, which is a kind of a big pub in Melbourne, but they have like Dry July alcohol-free events, which is the poster at the front. And also we've got kind of vaping. I took this photo actually in Morrison's, I think it is, when I was back in the UK, if I've got the right place, of having like vaping stuff kind of for sale at the end of the aisle, which I was really surprised about, because over here in Australia you can only buy vapes from a pharmacy, but we've seen a lot fewer young people smoking, but they are vaping more. But as though it's changed a little bit in the last, I think only in the last couple of months, it's become a pharmacy only medication. Facilities and infrastructure. These are some photos actually on the right from the UK, but kind of thinking about how people get to a place and get back. So whether taxis are available or public transport's available or any other sort of transport, bins and all that type of thing are very important to think about. I also, the image on the bottom left there is actually a DoorDash delivery that I had delivered by drone to my house a few months ago, which was absolutely surreal, to be honest. So I ordered something from a shopping centre about kind of 20 minutes away from me, like 20 minutes drive, and it arrived within about 5 minutes. I could see it on my phone. It arrived. The drone hovered over my house. It dropped down that package, and that was what was inside it. I didn't order very much. I just did it for fun. But yeah, so there's a lot of new things also emerging that we can consider that might be coming quite soon. Cleanliness is a really important element of the nighttime economy. This is actually photos I took from Newcastle upon Tyne when I visited last year, because I stayed out late and got to see all of this. But this is quite often what we associate with the negative side of the nighttime economy. But these guys, like the people who clean our streets at night, come along and save the day or save the night, and tidy everything up for the next morning. And I think this is really important. I think these are the guys from Adelaide, and we spoke to 17 guys, and they were so knowledgeable about the nighttime economy and what happens during those kind of early hours across the days of the week. So if you're looking for insights into your nighttime economy, you want to know what happens at 3 a.m, go and talk to the people who clean the streets, go to talk to the people who empty the bins. They were all men in Adelaide. So when I say these guys, there are women who do this, but in Adelaide, they were all men. But they were, so incredibly knowledgeable about the nighttime economy, but also, and so a great source of information, but also it's also very important, I think, to make sure that you've got that good balance between day and night. You don't want the nighttime overtaking the day or causing problems for the night, for the next morning, that, people going into the town centre and seeing kind of mess. They don't really want to see that. It can kind of detract from the town centre. Night walks is another way that we find out about. So talking to these guys was really valuable, but actually going on night walks can also be really valuable. And these are just some examples of ones that I've run. So we've won the one on the left-hand side was with the Night Shift Project. So it's kind of academics from the University of Melbourne, and we kind of, and I think University College London as well, and we kind of walked around and we spoke to various people who were using the city and kind of working at night. The middle image is in Adelaide. So we actually went out on a night walk. This is council staff. The guy in the middle is a police officer, me at the university, and then also like a peer support team workers. We all went out. And we went around, I think about 30 different locations. And at each location filled out a short survey saying how safe we felt, what the lighting was like, what we could see, basically kind of auditing lots of different spaces around the city. And I stayed out until 6 a.m, which is kind of, even though I do nighttime economy research, I'm kind of an early to bed person. So it's quite, for me to stay up going on a walk from midnight till 6. Was pretty hard, but actually it was really, really useful to know and see what's going on around the city, and also for the council workers to see that as well. And we've also done this with councillors, so kind of getting the politicians to actually go out and see what it's like, because there's a lot of opinions, I think, on what happens at night, but we don't necessarily it's not actually necessarily what is happening. There's perceptions of safety, for example, versus actual. And on the right hand side, that was a walk we did about it's like women and nighttime economy, and it was like a historical walk, but more of a open to the public, and it was just fun. But I learned a huge amount. But yeah, I've done so many night walks in the last few years. As I mentioned, safety of consumers is really important. That QR code takes you to Bristol rules, which you can see there. So Bristol's doing a huge amount of stuff. Carly Heath in Bristol is doing a lot of work around the nighttime economy, and I really like the Bristol rules that have been developed. So that's good to look at if you're looking at a way of putting together a bit of code of conduct for your nighttime users. But it's also not just the patrons. We want to think about safety. We also want to think about the workers. And over here, United Workers Union, who looks after hospitality workers, did a survey and found that 50% of people working in hospitality have experienced sexual harassment or sexual assault. And so I worked with a lady from Adelaide called Jamie, who collected almost 400 testimonials of people. She's kind of I'd say an influencer who works in hospitality, and she put up a story and said, I'm really upset about this incident that occurred. And so she kind of set up a way of collecting testimonials, and within a couple of months she collected like almost 400 testimonials. And so we helped to analyze some testimonials to work out kind of what people's experiences were. And as a result of that report, the South Australian government has actually implemented mandatory training to protect hospitality workers. So over here we have a thing called, I don't think they've got it in the UK. When I worked in hospitality in the UK, I didn't have to do it, but they have this thing called the Responsible Service of Alcohol Training. So before you actually can serve behind a bar, you have to, it's online training, you can do it in a couple of hours, but you must do this training to say, basically you can't serve people who are too drunk, etc., to be able to kind of to work and serve alcohol. And basically we're just adding, the South Australian government's looking to add in some kind of training into that, so like bystander intervention training, so that hospitality workers understand how to respond if they see sexual harassment, which can be really tricky and hard to kind of deal with, but also how to protect themselves, and how to report and that type of thing. I mentioned lighting before, but yeah, I think lighting can make things very exciting, and it can really change the atmosphere of a place. And these are just some examples of things from around Australia and New Zealand. So that bottom right hand side is this beautiful walk through the trees in New Zealand. I've forgotten, it's kind of big redwood forest, and you can kind of, they've done all these different displays. I feel like that's something that could be kind of replicated in somewhere beautiful, like Wales. But then there's lighting, for example, the top right, the Gold Coast. There's all these different things. The bottom left is an amazing festival called Illuminate, that is done in Adelaide every year. And so they bring in artists from around the world to kind of put on all these different light displays. But yeah, definitely, if you're over here, it's worth a visit to that one. So in summary, so the nighttime is a vital and growing sector, and it plays an important role in our economies. Data-driven strategies are a key to success. So really kind of looking into nighttime economy can help you to, or the data in relation to the nighttime economy can help you to really understand what's going on, and help you to kind of develop strategies and governance to support nighttime economies. It can also be really valuable actually in the positive benefits, so kind of measuring the economic value can actually be really helpful, and particularly also for politicians. Quite often it has been valuable, I would say, over here in getting the nighttime economy agenda on the table, because when we were able to say it's worth X amount of money, then it makes people's ears pick up and they want to support it. Whereas if you're just talking about nightlife, it's like, so what? It's just people having fun. But if you can kind of tangibly say how many people are working in those industries, it can be valuable. There's this shift beyond just traditional nightlife though. So kind of a shift, I suppose, to thinking about kind of 24-hour economies, not just the nighttime, but how the day and the night interact with one another. But also kind of thinking about how we, not just thinking about that alcohol-related offering, but thinking about how other activities can actually make a place feel safer. Having different people involved in the nighttime economy can make you feel safer. And I feel really that collaboration is essential for recovery post-pandemic, and also for growth. So really thinking about kind of bringing people together. And I think really the businesses know what needs to be done. It's just really, I suppose, bringing the businesses together with government, understanding kind of where the pain points are and kind of working through those and kind of working together to see kind of how can we make this area more livable, both day and night, but kind of what can be done in our nighttime economies and what can be done to support them. So that's me. We have lots of time for questions. I've kind of covered a lot there, but yeah, feel free to, yeah, you can add me on LinkedIn or reach out to me by email if you've got any questions after this as well, because I am always happy to talk about nighttime economy. As you can tell, I'm super interested in it. So yeah, thank you.
That's fantastic, Anna. Thank you. So interesting. I think we should all come on a study visit for a night out over to Australia to learn more. But yeah, I've got loads of questions, but I'll open it up to everybody else first. If anyone has a question? I can just start then. I'll go if people are shy. I think obviously there's so much potential there. We've seen examples from, cities that have these huge budgets and have all the support. I suppose what do you think the kind of takeaway for Wales would be if we could do like one thing? Sorry, that's
Good
quite a big
question.
question. Yeah.
For me personally, I'd be like, my first question would be like, how big is the nighttime economy in Wales? So to me, it would be wanting to know how many businesses are operating in the core nighttime economy. Because I think, yeah, I suppose that's the first step. It would be interesting because I haven't actually done any research, even though I was I grew up in Wales. I haven't done any research in Wales since for like a very long time. But I think it would be really good to, yeah, I suppose understanding from businesses what the key challenges are in terms of nighttime economy. So, for example, I mentioned kind of staff shortages. If that is a challenge, then maybe that is something that kind of government needs to address, for example. So kind of understanding what support businesses need. And then I think then also considering what the public need as well, what public wants. So I think I have been asked kind of similar questions. I got asked an anonymous question at one of the sessions. I was one of the, like, what is it when you put the questions in through what's the app that you put in? You can type your question in. It doesn't say which member of the audience. So about 500 in the audience.
Mentimeter or something.
Yeah. So I got one of the questions like, oh, what should we do to support our nightlife that's like it's not doing very well? What can we do about it? And I was like, kind of, it is really very much dependent on the individual area. So I think that's actually a really important point. So you can kind of know how big the Welsh nighttime economy is, for example, but then the nighttime economy in one area might be very small, but then the community might not want a big nightlife in that area. Whereas other areas, actually, it can be really important and valuable in kind of attracting kind of more investment, and it can be kind of tricky. I think that's one of the main things in Sydney actually is that because we had all those lockout laws and we kind of so the government implemented these laws where you couldn't get drinks like late at night, and all the bars and pubs couldn't serve alcohol, and so it really kind of damaged the reputation, but also damaged kind of investment, because quite often, if you're thinking about where you want to kind of go and invest, you really want the area to be livable. And livable means quite often to have like a range of different activity, there's kind of nightlife type of activities, the food, the drink. Can you have a nice, and that can be having a nice glass of wine, or it might be having a nice coffee. But you really want it to be about livability. But yeah, you have to really tailor it to the local area. Or there might be a really big like nightclub area that you want to, or with all those images that I showed you of from Newcastle and the mess that you can get kind of in the early hours of the morning before the street cleaning teams come around. It might be that there's issues that need to be addressed. So it is very, very dependent.
Yeah, thank you. I think that really resonates, is that whole livability, because that means different things to different people, doesn't it? But I think in the context of Wales, there's a massive potential there, because obviously one of the things that is really important is trying to kind of attract, Welsh people to move back to areas. There's government initiatives for that. And personally, I think one of the barriers there is, people who have gone away, lived in cities, they come back, and like you said, you can't even coffee sometimes after 5 o'clock. it's you need to build that kind of community. And I think, yeah, maybe not to the nighttime, but the twilight economy even.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really interesting concept.
Yeah, and I think it very much kind of aligns to kind of the issues we had in attracting people back to the urban centres in like post-pandemic over here is, people would move out to the regions and they wouldn't be able to get the coffee. And so we actually use it as the nighttime as a way of attracting
Oh,
people back and
wow.
going, look, actually you can get those back here. Don't you remember you can get kind of good nightlife? But if you can have those kind of precincts, I suppose, where people can go. I know, like when I lived in Anglesey, we all used to go to. I was in Chemist Bay, and we'd go to the Octagon at the weekend. Was the thing to do back in the day. So yeah, we'd all kind of like travel down, and we'd start up at the top of Bangor and kind of work our way through. And then you'd end up in the Octagon. But I suppose that people will always want those types of activities and making sure kind of I suppose kind of protecting some of those areas. And as I mentioned, there's this kind of like a slight shift, I suppose, in what some young people want. There are kind of advocates. I should also say, like, I don't come at this from a nighttime economy advocacy perspective necessarily. So there are a lot of people who own nightclubs, for example, who kind of move into kind of consultancy and that side of things. I suppose my perspective is more from a research and understand kind of what businesses and the public want. But I think, I suppose kind of, thinking about both of those things, and making sure you've got kind of good balance.
Yeah, definitely. And you said about the research. I think one of the things that I hear anecdotally a lot is, businesses know that they should be opening at night. So we're talking like areas where there's, I'm in an area in Snowdonia, so there's a lot of tourism, and we're worried that people won't want to come back because, they're staying in accommodation, but there's nowhere to eat at night. There might be a takeaway, but businesses know really that there is that market there, but it's taking that jump, it's taking on more staff where staff don't really exist, maybe, we don't have the kind of young population that want to work in hospitality. So I suppose it's how do we encourage people to make that leap, really?
Yeah, and I think I'm thinking. So my parents live up in like 4 hours north of Melbourne, in a very similar to kind of Snowdon, or maybe like Snowdon or the Lake District, kind of like a very popular kind of tourist area that people go to, and it's become very, very expensive. The house prices have like really shot up during COVID, because people could work from home, and now it's become very unaffordable, and we can't. Yeah, we just don't have any. They don't have any young people to kind of work in hospitality there either. So my brother has a hospitality business, and he can't get. I think cleaners were wanting like £35 an hour, and then they just weren't like kind of negotiating as to whether they were going to turn up or not. So it's really been very, very challenging for a lot of businesses in that kind of that area. One thing that they have been doing is actually organising kind of, I suppose, short-term accommodation for people who want to kind of almost like backpacking. So people can kind of come, and people go, it's a place called Bright. So they kind of go there and they will stay in like a 1-bedroom place. So there'll be like a unit with a like 1-bedroom unit where like they have workers that come and stay for the season. That doesn't really help you for the full kind of full year, but that's something that is happening. I worked in a place in Orford in Suffolk actually for a long time, which was run by a lady called Ruth Watson, who worked with Delia Smith and Jamie Oliver back in the day, and she actually had a separate, and this might not be affordable for many businesses, but she actually had a separate accommodation or house, that she used to actually bring in Australians, and they used to come and stay, and there was constantly like, every kind of 3 months we'd get kind of new Australians starting in the job, but they would stay in the accommodation, so they had like a bedroom each and shared the bathroom, but they worked for 3 months in hospitality, and then they left and new people came in, and that was just like a constant rotation. But that was in a very rural area, so I don't know, I'm not saying this is a solution for everybody, but that's something. These are just things that I've come across, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it
Cool.
can be
Yeah,
really
no,
tricky.
that's definitely, yeah. I don't know if anyone else has any more questions. We've still got a few minutes left. John, see your hand up.
Yeah, not questions really. I made a few observational notes really. So I'm a town councillor in Brecon. I like the bit you said about the nightmare, because I introduce myself to people as the nightmare, because I go around with the Mary Lloyd, if you know about that Welsh custom with the horse's head sort of thing. So I say you got 2 mares for the price of one doing that. But yeah, I heard on the radio a couple of months back saying that the nighttime economy in Britain, rather than London being the #1 city, it's Manchester and a few other places, Liverpool and Cardiff apparently. And again, the observations you said about alcohol use, because people are, more interested in taking selfies and healthy eating and so on. And then locally, we're having like street food pop-ups and things now to try and get people to go to pubs, whether it's inside the pub or outside the pubs. A lot of places doing that in villages outside the area as well. And our local tourist information centre, we put up there and online what businesses are open in the evening as well, because people are always like wondering or walking around town saying what's open and where, what takeaways or places to sit down. So we've been doing that for a little while. What else was there? Oh, and I see not just locally, but I also see Swansea and Cardiff have raised issues with transport with the nighttime economy. So people go to gigs, for instance, and the earliest they might finish is 10:30, and even some of the bands performing have to get the train back. So that's another problematic sort of thing for the nighttime economy. And I think lastly, yeah, we were looking, because we signed up to the White Ribbon campaign about, trying to curtail violence against women and young girls. And there's a purple flag status where towns and cities are safe places, but we've been looking into that, but we don't have, I can't think what they're called now, the sort of, there's a certain person, like a pub sort of liaison person we haven't got, and they recently died, so we need to get that person or somebody to sort of manage the scheme really, rather than the onus being on us.
Yeah, because the Association of Town Centre Managers, OJ McDonald, runs the purple flag, and that's what they brought over to Australia, which I think is it's fantastic. So yeah. No, it's good. It's thinking about kind of all these different innovative ways that you can kind of, I suppose, try to activate, and it's very much as you've kind of mentioned, kind of it's very much kind of area by area, thinking about what can be done. I know when I grew up in the hotel in Anglesey, it's called the gyda'r. We used to be really busy at the weekend, and we used to be busy with Wilfer contractors, and we used to be busy in the summer with holiday makers, but trying to kind of those Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, which I think for quite businesses in Australia and the UK, I think Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, how do we activate those days? And so we used to have like quiz nights, and I'm pretty sure it's like probably cultural appropriation stuff going on here now, but or might not be allowed, but we used to have like Hawaiian nights or Mexican nights, and so we had all these different to try and get kind of the local community to come along, or quiz nights and music nights, where we kind of had people come along with like the bands. So there can be lots of different ideas. Trying to get businesses to work together, because quite often they might see each other as competitors, but actually working collaboratively, you can get stuff working better.
Yeah, we do have a bit of that, because you could go to an open mic night nearly every night of the week around here, but some places are sort of like they see it as competition rather than everybody working together,
Yeah, it's
And we got a Black Friday or a Brecon Friday event tomorrow night, which is happening, so that's good that things like that are happening this time of year. It's a bit of extra impetus for people to go out.
So is that kind of like a discount night for people going? Okay, excellent. No, that's good. I haven't come across that over here, so.
All right.
Sounds like it's all going on in Brecon.
Well, we try hard. People don't appreciate it.
Yeah. I remember we were down there for an event, you probably remember, a couple of months ago, and we really struggled to find somewhere for food. Everywhere was
Monday
full
nights
there.
used to be non-existent. It's better now, but Monday nights used to be not at all. But now it's a few places, and then people just go to the likes of Wetherspoons then, because they know
that's
what
where
they're
we
getting
ended
there.
up.
Well, there we are.
Everywhere else was full. So
Proof in the pudding, literally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gee, that was something that I did notice when I came back, because I've been over here for 10 years, and when I came back last year and was going around the UK, I did notice that there's a lot more chains than there were. So kind of all those like the smaller businesses are kind of being kind of pushed out by let's say like the McDonald's and the Weatherspoons, I suppose. But I think I can't remember, like Costa Coffee. I think Costa Coffee's like everywhere. So all the little coffee shops, which is kind of a little bit of a shame, I suppose. I suppose supporting those small businesses to kind of retain the uniqueness and the kind of the specialness, I suppose, of some of those areas, and also the businesses themselves.
We've got a major pizza retailer opening now over the weekend, and lots of people are excited. And like, when we're going to have all these other big fast food chains, but you know, there are places you can get pizza. Perhaps not every night of the week, but there are places around. There's like 3, 4, 5 places you can get pizza.
Yeah. So no, I think and I think we have those big chains over here as well, but they're not as obvious. So sometimes there's like huge, like there's equivalent of Weatherspoons, but they're all, you wouldn't have a clue that they were all the same organization. They're all slightly, the menu's completely different. It's almost run as if it's independent, but they're not. Whereas I think the UK, I did notice the last time I went back, there's lots of Costa Coffees and Greggs. I love Greg's pasties, like cheese and onion pasties. You can't get them over here. You need to like bring those over to Australia. So if you have any contacts, tell them to set up over here. But yeah,
No,
I'm
I'd
more than happy to.
Sorry.
I was gonna say, I'm more than happy if anybody on the call kind of has any questions, or I'm always happy to have a chat with people about nighttime economy things as well, or kind of if you've got specific issues, I'm just happy to just have a chat, because as I say, I like to kind of share things that I learn, but I also really like to I actually learn from other people who get in touch with me and tell me about kind of what they're like you're saying, kind of, John, I'm learning from you what you're doing, what's happening. So I like to learn and like to share. So feel free to reach out to me anytime.
Brilliant. Oh, thank you so much, Anna. That was fantastic. My brain's like whirring now with all these things, so it's brilliant.
So like information overload.
No, it's great, and I think it was at just the right level as well. I think everyone must have got a lot from that. So yeah, thank you. I know we've gone over a few minutes now, so thank you so much for your time. Thank you all for joining as well. We will put the recording up, and we'll share your slides as well when you send those over, Anna. And yeah, like Anna said, get in touch with any questions. So yeah, thank you again. I'll stop recording now.
Thank you.
Great, thank you all so much.